My daughter Opal had spent 3 years working double shifts at a hospital cafeteria to pay for nursing school without taking a single cent from me. Her pinning ceremony was supposed to be the most important night of her life. Instead, it became the night my brother in law looked across the beautifully set banquet table, snapped his fingers at the server like she was invisible, and said, "Add whatever reorder to my sister in law's tab. She can handle it." I had my hands folded in my lap under the white linen tablecloth. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm until the sting registered. I smiled at the server, excused myself, and walked calmly toward the event coordinator's station to begin the quiet, methodical process of making sure my brother in law paid for every single thing he put in his mouth that night. I am a licensed CPA. I manage financial audits for mid sized companies. When a business owner is hemorrhaging cash through a vendor contract nobody bothered to read carefully, I find the leak and I seal it. I have spent 12 years doing exactly that, and I am very, very good at it. The most exhausting financial drain I have ever dealt with, though, was not a reckless client. It was my brother in law, Rowan. Rowan is my husband's younger brother by 4 years. He is 31 years old, perpetually between opportunities, and built his entire adult personality around the assumption that the people around him will cover the gap between what he earns and what he wants to consume. He drives a truck that my father in law co signed. He lives in an apartment that my mother in law's emergency credit card quietly props up every third month. And for the past 2 years, he has treated every family gathering, every birthday dinner, every holiday, every celebration that I planned and paid for as an open invitation to run up a bill and disappear before the check arrived. Last Thanksgiving, he brought his girlfriend and her two adult cousins to my house without asking. I had bought groceries for 14. I fed 18. He ate 2 plates of prime rib and left without offering to help clean up or contribute $1. When I mentioned it to my husband that night, he got quiet in that tired way he gets and said, "He's going through a rough patch, let it go." I let it go. I added it to the ledger I keep in the back of my mind, the one nobody sees, and I waited. Opal's pinning ceremony had been planned for 8 months. In nursing school, the pinning is everything. It is not the graduation, it is the moment, the night a nursing student becomes a nurse, when a small gold pin gets pressed into her lapel by someone who loves her, and she takes an oath in front of everyone who watched her struggle and stay. I had reserved a private dining room at an upscale hotel restaurant downtown, the kind of place that requires a deposit and a guest list submitted in advance. I had confirmed 12 seats. My husband, myself, Opal, her boyfriend, my parents, my sister, and 5 of Opal's closest friends from her cohort. 12 seats. 12 people. I had the seating chart printed. Rowan was not on it. 3 hours before the ceremony, my mother-in-law called me. Her voice had that particular quality it gets when she is about to ask me to absorb something unpleasant and frame it as a favor to the family. "Rowan is so proud of Opal," she said. "He was talking about her all week." I waited. He just thought it would be so nice to be there tonight. He mentioned bringing Cassidy. Cassidy is the girlfriend, and a couple of her friends who are also in healthcare, so it's really related. I said, "The private room seats 12. I submitted the guest list to the venue. She said, "I'm sure they can squeeze in a few more." I said I would look into it, and I hung up. Here is what I did not say out loud. I had already paid a non-refundable deposit of $400 to hold that room. The prix-fixe menu was $68 per person, committed in advance because the restaurant required headcount confirmation 72 hours ahead. I had already paid for 12. Adding 4 more people meant another $272 minimum, not counting drinks, which Rowan always orders aggressively when the bill isn't his problem. I called the restaurant and asked if the room could seat 16. The coordinator said yes, technically, but it would be tight and they would need an updated head count to prepare. I told her I would confirm within the hour. Then I called Rowan directly. He picked up on the second ring, which is faster than he ever calls back my husband. "Hey," he said, warm and easy like we talked every day. I said, "I heard you want to come tonight." Yeah, it'll be great. I'm bringing Cassidy and a couple of her friends. They were so pumped when they heard. I said, the room is Prix-fixe, $68 per person plus tax and gratuity. That comes to about $85 per head, with the automatic 18% added for parties. For 4 people, you're looking at $340 before drinks. There was a pause. Oh, I thought it was like a family dinner, he said. I didn't know it was that kind of place. It's Opal's pinning night, I said. It was always that kind of place. He laughed, that easy, deflecting laugh. I mean, I figured we'd just split it all together. We won't, I said. I'll add you to the reservation. You'll have a separate check. Another pause, longer this time. That's kind of a weird thing to do at a family dinner. Separate check, or I don't add to 4 seats, I said. Let me know by 2 o'clock. He said he'd think about it. He texted at 1:37 saying they'd be there. The pinning ceremony itself was beautiful. Opal stood at the front of that auditorium in her white uniform with her cohort, and when they called her name and I walked up to pin her, she was shaking slightly and I was shaking slightly, and the whole room was quiet in the way that only happens when something real is occurring. Her boyfriend was in the third row holding his phone up to record it, and when it was done, she exhaled this long, unsteady breath and grabbed my hand and didn't let go for a minute. That was the night. That was what I had planned for. By the time we arrived at the restaurant, Rowan and Cassidy's 2 friends were already at the hostess stand. Rowan had his arm around Cassidy, laughing at something on her phone, completely unbothered by the fact that he'd shown up without being explicitly invited, and that the last time I'd seen him, he'd eaten my Thanksgiving prime rib and left his plate on the coffee table. The dining room was set beautifully: candles, small flower arrangements, menus with Opal's name printed on them because I had asked the restaurant to do that. She walked in and pressed her hand over her mouth when she saw it. Rowan walked in behind her and immediately flagged down a server. Can we get a drinks menu? Actually, do you have a wine list, a real one? He looked around the table performing. We're celebrating. Let's do this right. The server glanced at me. I gave her the smallest nod. Here is what I had done before I left for the ceremony. I had pulled the event coordinator aside when I arrived for a venue walkthrough that afternoon. A woman named the coordinator, professional, efficient, the kind of person who handles things without drama. I had explained the situation clearly. There were 16 guests. 12 of those guests were on the original reservation and would be charged to my card at the end of the evening per our prior arrangement. 4 guests added today were to have a completely separate check, separated from the moment they sat down, nothing crossed over. I put it in writing in an email while she stood there, and she confirmed it by reply before I left the building. The restaurant had our arrangement in the system before Rowan ever picked up that wine list. He ordered a bottle of Barolo, the kind of wine that people order when they assume someone else is going to feel too awkward to say anything. It was $140. Cassidy's friends ordered cocktails. Everybody ordered the Prix-fixe, and Rowan added a supplemental seafood tower. $32 for the table. He said for the table. He gestured broadly at everyone. The seafood tower went to his side of the table. My mother-in-law, who had come to the dinner and was seated next to me, leaned over midway through the entree course and whispered, "This is so lovely. You really outdid yourself." She patted my hand. I smiled and said, "Thank you." She lowered her voice further. "You know, Rowan, he just loves a celebration. He gets carried away." I said, "I know." She said, "Just don't make a thing of the bill later, okay? He doesn't have a lot right now. Just roll it in." I looked at her. I kept my voice completely level. I said, "His check is already separated. It has been since this afternoon." The color in her face shifted slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I spoke to the coordinator before the ceremony and arranged it. He has his own check. Whatever he ordered tonight, he pays." She opened her mouth. I turned back to Opal, who was laughing about something with her friends, the little gold pin bright on her collar, and I was not going to let anything take me out of that moment. I reached over and topped off Opal's water glass and asked her what rotation she was most excited about, and my mother-in-law closed her mouth and sat quietly for the rest of dinner. Dessert came. Opal's friends sang an embarrassing, wonderful version of Happy Birthday adapted for pinning night, and Opal covered her face and laughed until she was crying a little. Her boyfriend got it all on video. It was the exact night I had wanted it to be. Then the server approached the table with two leather folders. She placed mine in front of me without a word. She walked to Rowan's end of the table and set the second one down in front of him. Rowan looked at it. He looked up at the server. "This should be combined," he said. "It was all one table." The server said pleasantly, "We have you on a separate check, sir, per the reservation arrangement." He looked down the table at me. I was reviewing my receipt. I did not look up. He picked up the folder. I watched his jaw tighten from across the table when he saw the total. The Barolo, the Prix-fixe for 4, the seafood tower, the cocktails, the supplemental dessert he had ordered for himself and Cassidy. His total came to $612 before tip. He put his card down. I heard it hit the leather. I finished signing my own receipt, folded it closed, and set it on the table. Cassidy leaned over and looked at his total, and her eyebrows went up. She said something quietly to him that I couldn't hear. He shook his head once, tightly. The server ran his card. It came back declined. He handed her a second card. She ran it. She came back with the folder. He took it, looked inside, and his jaw did the thing again. He fished out a third card from the very back of his wallet, the kind of motion that looks like someone reaching for a parachute cord. The server ran it. She came back with the folder. He signed it. I don't know which card worked or how much credit he burned through getting there, but he signed it. He put the pen down harder than he needed to. Cassidy's friends had already moved on, talking about something else entirely. Cassidy was looking at her phone. Opal, across the table, hadn't noticed any of it. She was still glowing. We said our goodbyes in the lobby. My mother-in-law hugged me a little stiffer than usual. Rowan walked out ahead of everyone without saying goodbye to me specifically. Cassidy waved. I waved back. My husband and I drove home with Opal, who talked the entire 40-minute ride about her first clinical rotation assignment and how nervous and ready she felt at the same time. And my husband reached over and held my hand on the center console, and that was the whole night. That was the right version of the night. I thought it was over. 2 days later, I got a phone call from my mother-in-law. She had clearly been composing herself before she dialed, because her voice was very controlled. She said Rowan was upset. She said I had embarrassed him in front of Cassidy and her friends. She said the way I had arranged things behind his back was manipulative and that a family dinner should not have been handled like a business transaction. I let her finish. Then I said, he ordered a $140 bottle of wine at my daughter's celebration dinner on the assumption that I would pay for it. He added a seafood tower he described as for the table, and then kept on his side. He brought 3 extra people to a reservation I had already paid a deposit on. He has done a version of this at every family event for 2 years. She said, he's going through a hard time. I said, he has been going through a hard time for 2 years. I paid for his hard time at Thanksgiving. I paid for it at Christmas. I paid for the graduation party I threw for him 2 years ago when he got his associate's degree, which he didn't finish. I'm done paying for his hard time. She was quiet. I said Opal worked double shifts for 3 years to pay for nursing school herself. She didn't ask anyone for anything. Last night was her night. I'm glad it was a good one. I hung up. What happened next is the part that I genuinely did not anticipate, not because I should have been surprised, but because I had underestimated how truly desperate things had gotten for Rowan without any of us fully seeing it. 4 days after the dinner, my husband got a call from our bank's fraud department. Someone had attempted to use our joint account routing number to set up an automatic payment. The bank had flagged it before it processed because the account number on the form didn't match any active account associated with our routing number, the way the fraud analyst explained it. Someone had clearly gotten our routing number, which appears on the bottom of any paper check, and tried to set up a payment transfer, probably to cover a bill. My husband asked where the routing number might have come from. About 6 months earlier, Rowan had asked to borrow our truck to help a friend move. My husband had given him the truck and a spare key. We had found a checkbook in the glove compartment afterward that we didn't remember leaving there. At the time, we'd thought nothing of it. We thought about it now. The payment had been flagged and blocked. Nothing was taken. But my husband filed a report with the bank, and the bank, because this is what banks do, filed a suspicious activity report. What we did not know until later is that Rowan had apparently tried the same routing number maneuver with two other family members, and those reports, combined with ours, crossed a threshold that put the matter in front of a federal fraud unit. Bank fraud involving ACH transfers is not a local matter, it became federal very quickly. I want to be careful here because some of this is still being resolved and I am not going to narrate outcomes I can't fully verify. What I can tell you is that Rowan was contacted by investigators, that Cassidy ended the relationship within 2 weeks of that contact, that my in-laws, who had spent 2 years protecting him from every consequence of every decision, found themselves staring at the real possibility of being connected to fraud through the co-signed truck and the credit card that had his name on it. And the fear of that, the sheer financial terror of it, broke something in the dynamic that had held for years. My mother-in-law called my husband, not me, and for the first time in their adult relationship, she said that Rowan needed professional help and that they could not keep covering for him. She did not apologize to me. I did not expect her to. But she said it to my husband and he heard it, and that mattered. 3 weeks after the pinning dinner, I got a voicemail from Rowan. It was 4 minutes long. He said he was sorry. He said it in that particular way people say sorry when they mean, I'm sorry for where I am right now, not I'm sorry for what I did. He mentioned that things had gotten complicated. He mentioned that he thought I had always had it out for him. He said, at the end, that he hoped I understood that family should come first. I listened to the whole thing, then I deleted it and went back to the spreadsheet I'd been working on. Here is what I know. I am 32 years old. I have spent more of my adult life trying to manage someone else's financial instability than I spent on my own CPA licensure. I have gotten very good at absorbing small violations and telling myself they were not worth the conflict, and I have learned, finally, the hard way, that every time I absorbed one, I taught him that I would absorb the next one. Opal texted me the day after the pinning dinner before she even left her apartment. She said, Mom, last night was perfect. Thank you. She attached a photo of herself in her uniform, the pin on her collar, holding a cup of coffee in the morning light, and she looked like someone standing at the beginning of something. I saved it to my home screen. The money I saved by not paying Rowan's $600 tab went into a gift card to the medical scrub store Opal likes, along with a card that said congratulations on doing it yourself. Because she did do it herself, and no one was going to use her celebration to run up a tab on my account ever again. Some people build their whole lives on the assumption that someone around them will always cover the gap. They count on your love for other people, your daughter, your peace, your desire to avoid a scene, to make you too uncomfortable to draw the line. They are betting that you care more about the moment than the pattern. I care about both. If you have someone in your life who treats every celebration you create as a personal expense account, I want you to hear this. Prearranging the separate check is not cold. It is not mean. It is not a betrayal of family. It is the only language that actually reaches someone who has decided that your boundaries are optional. You don't have to make a scene. You don't have to say a word at the table. You just have to handle it beforehand, quietly and completely, and then sit back and watch the bottle of Barolo they ordered on your tab become a very expensive lesson in what happens when the ATM finally says no. My daughter is a nurse now. She earned every letter of that title. And my tab has been closed for a long time. I just finally remembered to lock the register. I keep thinking about the look on Opal's face when she walked into that dining room and saw her name printed on the menu. That one small detail, her name in clean script, on a card she didn't know was coming, made her press her hand over her mouth. That is what I had planned for. That is what 2 years of absorbing Rowan's entitlement could have taken from her if I had let it. The thing about people who drain you is that they do not announce themselves. They do not walk in wearing a sign. They walk in wearing charm and a good excuse, and they count on you to love someone enough, your daughter, your peace, your idea of what family is supposed to look like, that you will pay whatever it costs to keep the surface smooth. Rowan did not show up to Opal's pinning dinner because he was proud of her. He showed up because he had learned over years of small tests that I would cover the gap. Every Thanksgiving plate I let go, every holiday tab I quietly absorbed. Every time I told myself it was not worth the conflict, I was not being gracious, I was teaching him that the register was always open. What I did differently this time was not dramatic. I did not confront him at the table. I did not make a speech. I made one phone call to the event coordinator that afternoon, put the arrangement in writing, and sat down to watch my daughter become a nurse. The consequence arrived on its own, the way consequences always do when you simply stop intervening to prevent them. That is what I had to learn the hard way, that integrity is not just about what you refuse to do. It is about having the clarity to see a pattern for what it is and the discipline to stop funding it, even when stopping feels uncomfortable, even when your mother-in-law is sitting 2 seats away asking you to let it go one more time. It would have been easier to roll his tab into mine. It would have cost me $600 and one more quiet night. But it also would have cost Opal something she didn't know was at risk. A celebration that was entirely, completely hers. There is a kind of intelligence that has nothing to do with credentials. I have a CPA license. I can read a balance sheet in my sleep. But the smartest thing I did that night had nothing to do with accounting. It was understanding that the most expensive thing I could do was nothing, that letting the pattern continue in the name of keeping peace was its own kind of choice with its own kind of price. Rowan's choices caught up to him not because I engineered it, but because I finally stopped engineering a soft landing for him every time he fell. Opal worked double shifts for 3 years. She did not ask me for a single tuition payment. She asked me for nothing except to show up, and I showed up, and I made sure the night was hers. The pin on her collar was something she earned. Nobody put it there except her own persistence, her own long, exhausting, unglamorous effort. I think about that when I look at the photo she sent me the morning after, standing in her apartment in her uniform, coffee in hand, tired and bright-eyed at the same time. And I think about what it means to actually build something versus what it means to expect other people to hand it to you. You cannot pour from an account that someone else has been quietly draining. And you cannot protect what matters most to you if you keep leaving the door open for the people who have already shown you exactly what they will take. My tab is closed. Opal's story is just beginning.